The Galactic Council's emergency beacon crackled to life in the deep void, broadcasting across 17 star systems. The message was simple: immediate evacuation of Kepler 442c. The ice age that had been creeping across the planet for the past decade had finally reached critical mass. Surface temperatures had plummeted to -60°C, and atmospheric processors were failing one by one. Every rational species had already begun their exodus. Every species except one. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the last transport ship, watching the other vessels disappear into hyperspace. The Zephyrian ambassador had personally pleaded with her to leave, his crystalline features flickering with concern. The Thoracan Mining Consortium had offered her passage on their luxury cruiser. Even the notoriously pragmatic Vex had extended an invitation, calling her an asset too valuable to lose to foolish sentiment. Elena had politely declined them all. Now, as the final ship's engines faded to pinpricks of light, she felt the familiar weight of solitude settle around her like an old coat. The human colony ship Resilience hung in orbit above the dying world, its cargo holds filled not with evacuation supplies, but with construction materials, hydroponic equipment, and enough fusion reactors to power a small city. "Ma'am," came the voice of her second-in-command over the comm. "Transport 1 is prepped for planetary descent. The site you selected shows optimal geothermal activity." Elena smiled, her breath visible in the increasingly cold air of the observation deck. The ship's heating systems had been diverted to more essential functions. "Excellent, Marcus. Begin deployment of the first wave. I want the foundation drills operational within 6 hours." The Zephyrians had called her mad. They were a species that thrived in temperate climates, their photosynthetic skin requiring precise light and temperature ratios. To them, Kepler 442c's transformation into a frozen wasteland was an extinction event waiting to happen. The Thoracans, with their silicon-based biology, could theoretically survive the cold, but their energy requirements made the planet economically unviable. As for the Vex, their hive mind, Collective had calculated a 97.3% probability of mission failure and deemed the endeavor illogical beyond acceptable parameters. They had all made the rational choice. Humans, Elena mused as she descended to the hangar bay, had never been particularly rational. The first transport bucked and shuddered as it pierced the planet's atmosphere, now thick with ice crystals and howling winds. Below them, the abandoned cities of 3 different species lay buried under meters of snow. Elegant Zephyrian biodomes had collapsed under the weight of ice. Thoracan strip mines had become frozen canyons. Vex geometric structures jutted from the white landscape like the bones of some massive creature. Elena's chosen site was different. Where others had tried to fight the planet's transformation, she intended to embrace it. The geothermal vents in the Karis Valley still pushed superheated water toward the surface, creating pockets of relative warmth in an otherwise hostile environment. While other species had seen this as merely a temporary respite, Elena saw potential. Her team's deep-core scanners had revealed an entire network of thermal channels running beneath the valley, a natural heating system that just needed the right touch to fully exploit. The first phase of construction began immediately. Massive boring machines designed for asteroid mining, carved deep into the planetary crust. Unlike the surface structures favored by other species, the human settlement would be built downward, following the warmth toward the planet's core. Each level would be carefully insulated and connected to the geothermal network, creating a self-sustaining ecosystem that would not merely survive the ice age, but thrive because of it. "Temperature holding at 22°C on level 3, reported Chief Engineer Nakamura, his voice carrying a note of amazed satisfaction. "The thermal regulation system is exceeding all projections." Elena descended through the construction levels, watching her team work with the methodical precision that had carried humanity to the stars. Hydroponic gardens were taking root in chambers carved from living rock. Water recycling systems hummed with quiet efficiency. Children who had been born in space played in corridors that would soon bloom with earth plants, their laughter echoing off walls that had never known sunlight. On the 6th month, the Zephyrian survey ship Harmonious Growth returned to the system, expecting to find a frozen tomb. Instead, their sensors detected thermal signatures, electromagnetic activity, and, impossibly, signs of expanding infrastructure. "This is Ambassador Kethvar of the Harmonious Growth to the Human Installation," came the familiar crystalline voice over the communications array. We are detecting significant activity on Kepler 442c. Please respond." Elena stood in her office, carved from the living rock 200 meters below the surface. Through reinforced transparisteel windows, she could see the main thoroughfare of what the colonists had begun calling Undercity. Shops and restaurants lined the broad corridor, their warm lights reflecting off polished stone walls. A park occupied the central plaza, complete with trees that had never known natural sunlight but grew tall and strong under full-spectrum lamps. Above them, the surface temperature had dropped to -85 Celsius. Below, children played in shirt sleeves. "Ambassador Kethvar," Elena replied, keying the transmitter. "This is Colony Administrator Vasquez. Welcome back to Kepler 442c." The silence stretched long enough that Elena wondered if the transmission had failed. Finally, Kethvar's voice returned, tinged with something that might have been wonder. "Administrator, how?" "Our projections showed total ecosystem collapse within 2 standard years. The planet should be uninhabitable." Elena looked out at her thriving underground city, then up at the surface monitors showing the howling blizzard above. Ice crystals the size of dinner plates were falling from the sky, and the wind was strong enough to overturn a transport vehicle. It was by any reasonable measure a hellish wasteland. "You're right, Ambassador," she said, and her smile was audible in her voice. "The surface is uninhabitable. Good thing we built our home somewhere else." Over the following months, word spread throughout the galaxy. The impossible colony on Kepler 442c had not merely survived but was actively expanding. Deep core mining operations had begun extracting rare minerals that had been impossible to reach when the planet was habitable. The extreme cold had preserved archaeological sites from the planet's previous inhabitants, creating a treasure trove for xenoarchaeologists. Most remarkably, the human settlement had begun exporting geothermal energy to orbital platforms, turning their frozen refuge into a power generation hub. Other species came to study, to marvel, and occasionally to trade. They would descend through the atmospheric storms to find warm tunnels carved from living rock, bustling marketplaces that had never seen a star, and humans who spoke of their ice-locked world with genuine affection. When asked why she had chosen to stay when every other species had fled, Elena would guide visitors to the observation deck that looked out over Undercity's main plaza. There, amid the laughter of playing children and the warm glow of artificial suns, she would gesture to the thriving community her people had built in the depths of a dying world. "Every other species looked at Kepler 442c and saw what they were losing," she would say, her eyes bright with satisfaction. "We looked at it and saw what we could gain. The frozen world above might have been abandoned by the galaxy, but in its depths, humanity had found something precious, a place to call home." And in the end, Elena reflected as she watched her people thrive in the warm darkness, that made all the difference.